Welcome back. We're so glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, really glad to have you here.
If you were trying to make sense of the absolute whirlwind of global news lately, you are in the exact right place.
It's been a lot.
It really has. Today, we have a deep dive that is incredibly timely and honestly pretty intense.
Yeah, it completely changes the context of the headlines you've been seeing all week.
Exactly. We're looking at a deeply sourced report from a Patreon collection. It's called Geopolitica e Economia by mvmetaverso.
Right.
And it details the coordinated U.S.-Israeli military strikes on Iran that occurred this past Saturday.
It is a critical piece of reporting. I mean, it paints a picture that is far more complex than just, the initial breaking news alerts or the push notifications you might have gotten on your phone.
Yeah, because the focus of this analysis isn't just on the military action itself.
No, not at all. It looks heavily at what was happening quietly behind closed doors right up until the very last second.
And that brings us to the hook, the central focus of today's deep dive. According to the mvmetaverso report, Oman's chief mediator claims that just hours before the bombs fell, Iran had actually agreed to historic, unprecedented concessions on its nuclear program.
Historic concessions.
We are talking about a major diplomatic breakthrough that was entirely eclipsed by military action.
Utterly eclipsed.
Now, we are looking at some incredibly charged statements today from global powers. From Washington to Moscow.
Lots of heavy accusations flying around.
Which is why I want to make a quick reminder as we dive into this. Our goal today is not to pick a side.
Right.
We are not here to tell you who is right or who is wrong.
Yeah.
We are just here to impartially unpack exactly what these diplomats are claiming happened in the shadows and how the rest of the world is reacting.
Just sticking to the source material.
Exactly. We want you to have the full, unfiltered picture based strictly on the reporting.
And that is the crucial lens for this deep dive. We need to lay out the diplomatic architecture that was built, look at how it fell apart, and objectively analyze the statements from the key players involved.
Without getting pulled into the political spin.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with the timeline, because the whiplash from high-stakes diplomacy straight into airstrikes is jarring.
Whiplash is the perfect word for it.
The central figure in this report is Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi.
Oman frequently plays the role of a neutral third party in the Middle East.
Right, and the text notes al-Busaidi had been actively traveling back and forth between Washington and Tehran.
He was the chief mediator for these nuclear negotiations.
Let's pause there for a second. We hear the term shuttle diplomacy thrown around a lot in the news, but what does that actually look like on the ground in a situation this tense?
Well, it's grueling, both physically and diplomatically.
Oh.
Shuttle diplomacy essentially means the two primary parties, in this case the U.S. and Iran, either refuse to sit in the same room or it's politically impossible for them to do so.
So they can't just hop on a Zoom call and hash it out?
Definitely not. So the mediator becomes the human bridge. They are flying to one capital, sitting in these marathon negotiation sessions, hammering out a single clause, and then immediately boarding a plane.
To fly to the other capital to present it.
Exactly. It requires an immense amount of trust in that mediator from both sides. You are entirely reliant on them to accurately convey not just the text of a deal, but the tone and the intent of the other side.
Which makes the timeline we're looking at even more staggering. You have this grueling, physically demanding diplomatic effort happening, and the contrast between the diplomatic messaging and the military reality is just massive.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
The analysis highlights a quote from al-Busaidi on CBS News' Face the Nation. Just hours before the strikes commenced, he was on national television declaring that a peace agreement is within our grasp.
Just hours.
Hours. Just hours before. Imagine being that diplomat.
What's fascinating here is the profound whiplash of this situation. It's almost unprecedented.
Yeah.
You have the chief mediator on a major news program signaling a massive global win, projecting total optimism, and then the complete opposite happens.
The report details his devastation once the attacks actually began. On Saturday morning, as the strikes were becoming public knowledge, al-Busaidi posted on X.
And what did he say?
He stated, "I'm appalled. Active and serious negotiations have been undermined once again."
Undermined once again.
Yeah. And he didn't stop there either. He immediately issued a plea for Washington to stand down.
He warned that the attacks benefit neither U.S. interests nor world peace.
Right. And he explicitly stated, this is not its war, urging the United States not to be drawn in any further.
We really need to look at his specific language there. The word appalled carries massive weight in this context.
It's not your usual diplomatic phrasing, is it?
Not at all. Diplomats usually rely on highly sanitized words, things like concerned or troubled, or we're monitoring the situation closely.
Right, very careful language.
Exactly. Using appalled speaks to a profound, almost visceral sense of shock and betrayal regarding the process he was managing.
But I have to ask, could this just be a case of the right hand not talking to the left hand? Like, maybe the diplomats in Washington simply didn't know the military was moving forward.
That bad timing theory is a tough sell for many international observers
Why is that?
because it is incredibly rare in modern geopolitics for back-channel, high-stakes diplomacy to be so abruptly and publicly contradicted by kinetic military action.
Meaning actual bombs dropping, not just moving ships around for posture?
Right. Usually, if a kinetic strike is imminent, the diplomatic channels go quiet.
They stand down.
Exactly. The mediators are quietly warned to step back or stall. The fact that Oman was actively broadcasting success right as the operation launched suggests a total structural disconnect between the diplomatic tracks and the military tracks.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question. What was actually lost? We hear about historic concessions, but let's break down exactly what Iran had allegedly agreed to.
The report goes into some very specific details on this.
According to Al-Busaidi, this new framework wasn't just a return to the status quo. He claimed this new framework actually went further than the old Obama-era JCPOA benchmarks.
It did, according to the framework detailed in the text.
What were the actual terms?
The specific terms Al-Busaidi used were zero buildup and zero stockpiling.
Zero stockpiling.
Yes, and crucially, this was to be coupled with full verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA.
Okay, so when Al-Busaidi says zero stockpiling, what does that actually mean physically? Are they just putting a padlock on a warehouse full of uranium and handing the keys to the IAEA? Because padlocks can be broken?
It is much more permanent than a padlock. The report explains that the existing stockpiles of highly enriched uranium were to be diluted and converted into irreversible fuel.
Irreversible. So let me try to visualize this. It's like mixing paint, right?
Mixing paint.
Yeah, like if you take a highly concentrated color, say a pure bright red, and you dump it into a massive bucket of white paint, you mix it all together and you get pink.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Once that red is mixed in, you can't magically reach into the pink paint and extract the pure red back out. The chemistry has changed.
That is a brilliant analogy, yes.
Yeah.
By converting the enriched uranium into this irreversible fuel, you remove the physical capability to suddenly pivot toward a weapons program. It changes the material's chemical destiny.
Wow.
And the timeline for this was astonishingly fast. The report notes that the broad political terms were ready, and full implementation was possible within just 90 days.
Here's where it gets really interesting, a 90-day roadmap. 90 days to completely de-escalate a major global flashpoint with full IAEA verification.
Incredibly fast.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah.
You are saying full implementation in 90 days. In geopolitical terms, 90 days is the blink of an eye. Setting up IAE verification, converting all that material, that is a massive logistical undertaking.
It is.
Is it possible the U.S. and Israel struck because the timeline was moving too fast? Maybe they felt they couldn't verify it quickly enough and didn't want to risk Iran stalling during that 90-day window?
That is exactly the core of the debate. And it's precisely the tension highlighted by the international reactions in the report.
How so?
When you have a 90-day implementation window sitting on the desk, the decision to launch a preemptive strike completely resets the board.
It doesn't just delay the 90 days.
No, it burns the board entirely. And the way different nations view that decision, whether it was a necessary security measure or a reckless abandonment of peace, is highly fractured.
Let's map out those global reactions because the fallout detailed in the mvmetaverso piece is swift and incredibly varied. We want to spend some time here to see how different nations are interpreting international law in this exact moment.
It's a very wide spectrum of reactions.
Let's start with Europe, specifically the European Union's response.
The EU's response, delivered by Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, is honestly a masterclass in walking a geopolitical tightrope.
A tightrope? What did she say?
She stepped in and described the situation as dangerous, making it clear she was in contact with Arab and Israeli counterparts to find diplomatic avenues.
But she didn't condemn the strikes, did she?
No. She notably avoided explicitly condemning the U.S.-Israeli operation. Instead, she balanced her statement.
How do you balance a statement like that?
Well, she reiterated that Iran's nuclear and missile programs remain a serious threat to global security, while simultaneously urging all parties to exercise maximum restraint.
Why that specific phrasing? Why call it dangerous but avoid the word condemn?
Because the EU is caught between two massive competing interests. On one hand, the US is their primary strategic and military ally. You rarely see the EU outright condemn Washington's military actions.
Right. And the other hand?
On the other hand, Europe is geographically much closer to the Middle East than the US is. If a wider regional war breaks out, Europe feels the immediate brunt of it.
Energy shocks, refugee crises.
Exactly. Shipping disruptions, all of it. So, Kales has to validate the security threat Iran poses to keep allies happy, while begging everyone to stop shooting because Europe simply cannot afford a wider war.
That makes a lot of sense. A call for restraint without a direct condemnation. But not all of Europe took that approach.
No, they didn't.
The report highlights Norway. Their foreign minister, Espen Barth Eide, took a much harder, strictly legal line.
He spoke to AFP, right?
Yes, and he argued that the attacks flat out violated international law. His argument centers entirely on the concept of an imminent threat.
And that is a crucial foundational distinction in international law. The right to self-defense is universally recognized. If a nation attacks you, you can shoot back.
Makes sense.
But preemptive self-defense, striking someone before they strike you, traditionally requires absolute proof that an attack on you is literally about to happen.
That's the imminent threat standard.
Exactly. It exists to prevent chaotic preventative wars based on mere suspicion.
So Norway is arguing that because there was no proof Iran was going to launch an attack that morning, dropping bombs preemptively crosses the line from self-defense into illegality.
Correct. Norway is strictly adhering to the letter of the law regarding imminent threats, completely separate from whether they like Iran's nuclear program or not.
And if Norway's response was a nuanced legal critique, Russia's response was a furious hardline condemnation.
Furious is right. The Russian Foreign Ministry did not mince words here.
They called the attacks a premeditated and unprovoked act of armed aggression against a sovereign and independent UN member state.
The Russian response goes much, much further than just condemning the violence or arguing legal definitions.
They brought in the regime change angle.
Yes, Moscow explicitly accused Washington and Tel Aviv of using nuclear concerns as a mere cover for a larger, unstated goal of regime change in Tehran.
That's a huge escalation in rhetoric.
Furthermore, they issued a stark warning that bombing nuclear facilities that are protected and monitored by the IAEA was completely unacceptable and sets a dangerous global precedent.
The report also mentions a very specific, sharp accusation from Russia's Security Council Vice President, Dmitry Medvedev.
Yeah, that part was striking.
According to Al Jazeera, he accused the United States of using the Oman negotiations purely as a front for military action.
That is a massive, incredibly damaging accusation. Medvedev is arguing that the diplomatic track wasn't just ignored or a victim of bad timing.
He's saying it was a trap.
He is claiming it was actively weaponized as a smokescreen. The accusation is that the U.S. let Oman keep Iran busy at the negotiating table, projecting false optimism, specifically to lower Tehran's guard while the military loaded the bombers.
Wow. Whether that is true or not, just the accusation being out there in the geopolitical ether is wild.
It undermines the whole system.
And the report rounds out the global picture with several other notable voices that show how fractured this is. We have French President Emmanuel Macron stepping in, warning that the outbreak of war here has grave consequences for international peace and security.
Pakistan also weighed in.
Right. Pakistan formally condemned what it called unjustified attacks and called for immediate diplomacy.
And then there's the technical perspective, which is vital here.
You mean the Arms Control Association?
Yes.
This detail from the text is particularly striking. They actually warned days before the attacks happened that there was no indication Iran was close to arming its nuclear material in a way that would justify unilateral military strikes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, these fractured reactions highlight a massive, potentially irreparable global divide in how international law, preemptive self-defense, and nuclear containment are interpreted today.
The consensus is just gone.
Exactly. Look at the spectrum we just discussed. You have the EU prioritizing political restraint and threat management. You have Norway strictly adhering to the imminent threat legal requirement.
You have technical bodies saying the threat wasn't imminent.
And you have Russia claiming the entire diplomatic process was a deceptive front. This isn't just a disagreement over a single military action on a Saturday. It is a fundamental breakdown in international consensus on the rules of the road.
Nations no longer agree on how they are allowed to act on the global stage.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean for us right now in the immediate aftermath? Because the Patreon piece provides a very grim update on the current reality on the ground.
It really is grim.
Iran is not just absorbing these strikes. They are now actively retaliating against U.S. bases across the Gulf.
The situation has rapidly escalated from a preemptive strike into active regional retaliation.
The immediate consequence is that the diplomatic architecture, which, as the text notes, was meticulously built by Oman over months of grueling mediation, now lies in absolute ruins.
That 90-day window for peaceful disarmament has been completely shattered.
Meticulously built over months, destroyed in hours. I want to connect this directly back to you listening to this deep dive right now.
It's easy to feel disconnected from this.
It really is. You might be thousands of miles away from the Strait of Hormuz. You might just be walking your dog or commuting to work. Why does the collapse of a back-channel deal in Oman matter to your daily life?
It matters deeply because it perfectly illustrates how incredibly rapidly global stability can evaporate. Al-Bisaidi called this a very historic opportunity to resolve this issue diplomatically.
And when a window like that slams shut, the shockwaves do not stop at the borders of the Middle East.
Not at all. It instantly impacts global supply chains. The Gulf is a massive artery for global energy markets, and instability there translates directly to the prices you see in your everyday life.
Gas prices, shipping costs, it impacts broader economic security for everyone.
Exactly. But perhaps most importantly, it degrades the fundamental trust required to prevent wider global conflicts.
Trust is so fragile.
It is. When regional conflicts escalate into broader wars, it demands vast international resources, it shifts global alliances, and it creates a baseline of economic volatility that absolutely trickles down to everyone. You cannot isolate the economic impact of a major conflict in that region.
Trust really does seem to be the biggest casualty here, aside from the physical destruction of the strikes, of course. The mediator trusted the process, the negotiators trusted the timeline, and all of it was upended in a matter of hours.
This raises an important question. Can diplomatic back channels ever truly function again if negotiators feel that bombs might drop at the exact moment a deal is being finalized?
That's the real chilling effect.
Diplomacy at its core requires at least a baseline assumption of good faith. If one side believes the other is using the negotiating table merely to keep them distracted as a smokescreen, like Medvedev accused, the very concept of a negotiated peace becomes almost impossible to achieve.
Why would you ever compromise if you think it's a trap?
You wouldn't.
It is a deeply sobering thought. To quickly recap the intense journey we just took through this source material, we looked at a report detailing how Oman's chief mediator had brokered historic, verified nuclear concessions.
A plan involving the irreversible conversion of enriched uranium within a remarkably fast 90-day window.
We saw how those hopes were suddenly dashed by coordinated U.S.-Israeli airstrikes, leading to profound shock from the Omani mediator.
And we broke down the highly fractured global outrage, with nations clashing over the legal definitions of preemptive self-defense.
Finally, we looked at the grim reality of immediate military retaliation currently unfolding in the region.
As we wrap up today's analysis, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on the realities presented in this text.
What's that?
If a mediator as dedicated, neutral, and central as Oman can be completely blindsided by sudden military action from the very parties they're actively mediating between, what does this mean for the future of third-party diplomacy? If trust in a neutral mediator is no longer enough to pause the bombs, how will any nation ever feel secure enough to step up to the negotiating table in tomorrow's conflicts?
That is exactly the kind of question we all need to be asking right now as we watch these events unfold. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into a highly complex, rapidly evolving geopolitical moment. Keep asking questions, keep seeking out multiple perspectives, and we will catch you next time.